All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today is a session, as you all know, on how to care and groom your Shetland pony. It's really all about your little mini horse from Scotland. We've got some really strong opinions on horseshoes and how you should deal with them. So if you're any farriers in the chat, buckle up. It's going to be spicy. The astute among you will recognize today's April 1st, and hopefully that is the worst April Fool's joke you experienced today. It's actually about.
This is great. I love it. Well done,
Yeah.
James.
Sorry. This is the best I could do. Today's actually about hardening your cloud for agentic AI. It is the thing you signed up for, and all about building default deny guardrails in AWS and GCP. So a quick note, by attending today, you are entered into our raffle to win a trip to Identiverse in Vegas in June. It's a large identity conference around identity security and IAM. So everything's taken care of to get you there. We should have a drawing. I think it's later in the week. But yeah, hang on here. If we have your email address, that's great. If we don't have your full name, we might email you and ask you what it is and make sure you're not a bot, and then do the drawing. So thank you for attending. You are in, and yeah, I hope to see you in Vegas. But on to the brass tacks. Our speaker today is Jeff Moncrief, my lovely and longtime colleague here at Sunry Security. To give a little intro on Jeff, he's been doing this a while, about over 20 years. He's been in every kind of cloud, in every kind of organization, helping people do things like compliance, set up IaaS and PaaS, Kubernetes, network traffic analytics, incident response, security architecture, you name it. And for the last 6 years, he's been doing identity security here at Sunry. He's been at Cisco. He's done a ton of NetSec, so he's seen it all. And when I met him, he had no gray in his beard. So let's see. That's
maybe a little bit.
Cloud security.
A little salt and pepper.
Yeah, right, exactly. So Jeff, thank you so much for driving this conversation today. Jeff is just a wealth of information. A quick housekeeping note: please ask questions. You have a little chat function in there. We're going to cover them at the end, unless we see one that's relevant and we want to address it, in the flow of conversation. But we will get to them all. And yes, stick around to the end. We have a lot of resources we want to provide for you, some stuff ready to go for you to use in AWS. And really, today, to kick it off, Jeff, I mean, you're working with a ton of different people deploying agents in cloud, in their clouds, generally in AWS, some in GCP. Give us sort of the breakdown of what you're seeing today, what the difference in the risk sort of the risk that we're seeing now in this kind of new type of identity, and how it's impacting IAM.
Yeah, it's interesting. So so first of all, thanks for joining us today. I'm super appreciative that everyone is here. This is a really important topic that anyone in InfoSec, CyberSec needs to be really, really well versed in at this point in time. It's not a nice to have skill set. This is a need to have skill set. Like James said, I've been here almost 6 years at Sunry, just focused on IAM risk in the public cloud, things like least privilege, overprivilege, cyber litter and cyber garbage, like I usually call it. And just the fact that in today's risk landscape, you hear identity is the new perimeter. No, identity is the new network. I've been saying that for years. And I also say that bad actors don't hack. They don't craft bespoke exploits to zero-day vulnerabilities at this point in time, because it's so easy. And there's so many ways that they can do it. They just log in. They just log into the environment. And, we've been battling that here for years. But the problem has exacerbated it significantly because of the advent and the embracement of AI, right? And so what we'll talk about in this session is I'm going to talk about, what AI means from a cloud-native perspective, what it means from an endpoint perspective, and what I'm hearing more and more about from security leaders that I talk to about what they're worried about. I'm actually going to take you through, we're going to show you what Bedrock looks like in action. We're going to show you what Claude Code looks like in action. We're going to show you what guardrails look like and how you create them, as well as what they look like in action. And then we'll give you some takeaways as we go through it. So with that being said, James, I'm just going to share my screen. You may tell me that everything's good. We'll keep going.
All right.
All right. Can you see everything?
I see Claude, and I see a very interesting infographic.
Yeah, you see a very interesting infographic. So good. It's exactly what you should see. So I'm not going to do slides today. What I do want to do, though, is use this infographic that I use at trade shows. I use sometimes for customer engagements and whatnot. And I want to use this so that everyone understands the landscape with which we're talking about, right? Yes, you see Claude code. That's real. It's legit. We're going to show it to you in a second. But I want to take a step back, right? And also, as you look at this infographic, don't worry about all the numbers and things like that, because I did say this is multi-purpose, but I want you to focus on the things in the middle here, the actual services within AWS themselves. And I want you to focus on all the entry points on the left-hand side over here. All right, these are all the different ways that your teams, your developers, and really, everyone that's interacting in your cloud, this is how they're getting in. And if you think about the last couple of years, as far as agentic security goes and AI security goes, the market's been really focused on the part in the middle here. All right. That's the part where you've actually got those AI services that are cloud native. They live inside AWS, GCP, Azure, you name it. And they're the ones that are doing things that are incredible for the business from a product standpoint, from a solution standpoint, whether that's back office, whether that's front end. They're incredible. I mean, we use Bedrock here, for example, at Sunray Security in a number of ways. It could be things like SageMaker, things like Q. If you're in GCP, it could be things like Vertex, right? And folks were really worried about the models and what the models could and couldn't do. And then that kind of branched into, well, now folks are starting to get worried about the services themselves. And as you use the models and as you use the agentic parts of these services, what can they touch and actually access within the cloud itself? Can you use a Bedrock agent accidentally or intentionally to circumvent its intent and, create an identity, attempt to create infrastructure, right? That's kind of where the conversation started to steer. Then over the last 6 months, and honestly, it has really picked up speed significantly over the last 3 months. We've got the agentic coding scenario that more and more leaders are worried about. And that brings us back over here to the endpoints, okay? Typically, we have been worried about folks who can get into the cloud through SSO federation, into the web console, programmatically over the AI, over the API, and those kinds of things. And we've been trying to secure those and harden those from an IAM and at least privilege standpoint. Well, now, fast forward to today, and practitioners, us, security leaders, we've got to worry about all these agentic coding endpoints now. VS Code, Claude Code, you've got Codex, you've got Kiro. The list goes on, and these IDEs and these terminal command line agentic coding applications just get more and more numerous, it seems like by the weeks. And every single one of these is a factor in your security posture. And if you want to know what, I talked to a CISO 2 weeks ago, and big organization CISO, and he said this is his number one fear, and he called it a mess. And he was telling me about how he had just heard the day before that some of his developers had bought 10 Mac Minis and they were running OpenClaw on it. And he was scared to death if they hooked that into their cloud, right? And that was real. And he used the word mess. I thought it was very appropriate. But that is kind of what we're dealing with here. We've got a within scenario that's been there for a couple of years now, but now we've got an outside in scenario as well, where we've got to ensure that these endpoints cannot do anything inside the cloud that is misuse, whether it's intentional or accidental. Okay, but that's really the landscape, right? That's the lay of the land. This is what we're going to be talking about as we move forward today in this conversation. Now, I want to make sure that everyone understands what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a Bedrock or a cloud native service. I want to make sure everyone understands what I'm talking about when I'm talking about these entry points. So if I log into the Cloud Permissions Firewall, which is Sunry's flagship product, this is not an extensive demo today, so don't worry. But I do want to show you something here. So this is our homepage. This is our dashboard. You can see all the risks that we're exposing, that we're illuminating. from an identity standpoint. And there's nothing here that you can't fix with us. Okay, it's really, really an amazing solution to lay down a control framework. But you'll also see at the top up here that we've got this Ask Wally feature. Now, this is us having embedded agentic AI straight into our product. This is throughout the product, but this is actually using Bedrock on the back end, okay? And you can see it says, hey, I'm Wally, your trusted advisor. Do you want me to help you tackle excessive privilege or quarantine zombies? And you can ask it, hey, can you list any unused identities, if I can spell, that are in my production accounts, okay? This is it interacting with the Bedrock subsystem live, okay? It says it's thinking, it's going to come back with a reply, and it says looking to find your production accounts. There you go. You have 71 unused identities across your 2 production accounts, okay? This is great. It used the LLM to go figure out what's there, and then from an agentic perspective, it says, would you like me to help you quarantine these identities or get more details about specific ones? So there's multiple different directions that I can take. That's not the point. The point is the Bedrock LLM that's actually powering this assistant, this agentic assistant that is helping you understand the risk that we're exposing, as well as it's able to actually help you fix this risk in real time. So it will implement our controls on your behalf if you prompt it to here, which is fantastic. Our customers love that. Great. That is a typical great use case with which someone would want to use Bedrock. Okay. But then you got to think about if you want to start asking it to do other things. And that's where you can get in trouble if you don't have guardrails in place, because people aren't really thinking about what this looks like under the hood on the cloud service provider side. And I'll show you what that looks like in a second. The other thing I want to show you is an example of one of those endpoints. Okay. This is Claude Code. And if you're not familiar with it, Claude Code is, it's from Anthropic. I'd say it's one of the top 2 or 3 AI solutions out there in the market. Obviously, there's ChatGPT. Their version of that is Codex and Codex CLI. There's plugins for it. You can download the individual apps themselves. What it does, though, is it's agentic coding. So it allows you to develop and innovate very, very fast to the point where even if you don't understand and know how to code, you can build things with this. A little bit dangerous. It's called vibe coding. But vibe coding in itself has just exploded just from a presence standpoint over the last 3 to 6 months. But I can say, hey, Claude, can you create me a hello world HTML file and open it in Chrome? Okay, it's going to go do that. I can ask it to do anything. Create an iOS app, create a Mac app, create me a website, you name it. The sky's the limit. And you're going to watch what it's going to say. It's going to go create it. Do you want me to open it? There you go. Hello world. Okay, it's that easy. And from here, I could iterate and I could keep it, I could add features, whatever you want. It can write any code across any language. It's incredible, right? It is truly a phenomenal technology. But what if it doesn't have guardrails in place? And that's also what we're going to talk about here. So that's kind of the idea is we want to get these guardrails in place so that you can use these services. Your developers, your application teams can use these services, but they don't misuse them. And I don't mean that in an intentional way. It's accidental. It's typically going to be accidental in a lot of these, especially these agentic endpoint coding scenarios, because these AI identities, they kind of take on a personality of themselves, and they're going to do whatever it takes to get the job done. Regardless of whether or not you tell them to go create things, they're going to do it to get the task accomplished that you assign them. Okay? Now, the first way that we set these guardrails from a cloud native perspective is we want to create policies. Okay? And this isn't rocket science. This isn't new. We've been talking about creating, in particular, AWS service control policies, resource policies, least privilege policies. We've been talking about creating these for ever since the cloud was born. That was it really 10 plus, 15 plus years. So these controls have always been around, but they're more critical now and essential now than ever with the onslaught of AI and AI agents that are interacting within and in and out of your cloud. So the first that we want to talk about is service control policies, okay? Service control policies are critical because they will allow you to control who and what can access specific services across different regions inside AWS, okay? You can get as wide or as granular as you want. But the bottom line is you want to set some base SCPs that dictate which services are turned on and turned off, okay? Because by default, all 300 plus services within AWS, because that's what we're talking about here, are turned on by default. A lot of folks don't know that. So these agents can interact with all these services, almost like a flat network scenario where everything can talk to everything because they're all turned on by default. And when you combine 300 services and all the permissions, you're looking at over 15,000 permissions just inside AWS that these agents potentially have access to. Okay, and that's a scary, scary thought. So what you want to do is you want to lay down service control policies within your AWS organization management account that are going to basically dictate how your cloud's going to run. These services can and cannot be used, and the ones that can be used, these are the permissions that can and cannot be used within that particular service, right? And these are the guardrails. This is just a very, very basic fundamental guardrail. The middle one here, this is an example of a resource control policy. It's an extension of a service control policy. And what it does is it allows you to set what Amazon or AWS calls a data parameter, okay? This is going to allow you to essentially specify which data objects and data services can and cannot be used within your cloud, particularly when being accessed by third parties. This is that whole supply chain scenario, right? You also are going to have third parties that are using AI agents that are interacting with your cloud. You have to think about those and what they absolutely cannot get access to, particularly if they're being misused. And then the third one over here, the least privileged IAM policy. This is more granular. This is more specific. This is what you're going to be putting on the individual identities themselves. This is super, super important because if I go back to the endpoints over here, the endpoints that were listed here, typically when they interact with your cloud, they're not necessarily always assuming a non-human identity. Many times, especially with Claude Code and Codex and those kinds of things, they're actually assuming your identity. They're acting on your behalf. So these least privilege policies are super, super critical as it relates to what the actual users can do in your cloud more now than ever, because you have these agents that are assuming their persona, their credentials, and then acting on their behalf within the accounts, the projects, the subscriptions, and obviously the services themselves, okay? So that's kind of the baseline. You really need to be thinking about how you implement those kinds of controls. From the Claude side, this other browser I've got, or this other Claude instance, you're gonna see that I've got a Claude MD file. This is an example of how you can guide the agentic coding agent, okay? You can give it rules. You can tell it what it cannot do. You may do this. You cannot perform any creates, modify, attaches, or expand IAM permissions, okay? Those kinds of things, forbidden examples. It's a great start. Problem is that the agents don't always look at this. I can attest to that. And this is only as good as the form that you've got it in. I could be using the Claude app. I could be using the Claude CLI as well, or using Claude in another IDE, and it may have no idea that I configured this MD file for this particular VS Code extension. So it's a nice start, but I can assure you that it is not going to protect you from the agent not doing something mischievous within your cloud once it hits it. It's just a nice set of basic guardrails to try and keep it on the straight and narrow, if that makes sense. Okay, so hopefully everyone kind of understands what we're talking about now from a landscape, both in the cloud as well as at the endpoint, and the way that these different agents are being used to interact. So the first thing that we're going to do now is I'm actually going to show you what Bedrock looks like in action. So I'm going to log into, this is an actual AWS environment. This is the Identity Center view, which anyone that's familiar with any sort of mature, growing AWS organization, you're going to have this Identity Center view. I'm going to go into production, and I'm going to log in as the data scientist, okay? Now, I've already approved this request to log into this account as that permission set. We actually have the cloud permissions firewall that's protecting it with just-in-time access. I approved that access prior to this demo just so this runs a little faster. But you're going to see when I log in as the data scientist here, I've got access to Amazon Bedrock, okay? This is kind of giving you that behind-the-scenes view of what I was showing you with Wally, okay? This is the actual behind-the-scenes view of Wally, the AI agent that I was showing you, and the product, okay? So I can come over here, and what I want to do is I want to show you an example of an agent, okay? You can create your agents here. You can modify them, test them, deploy them, etc. But we've got this one here that's called My Health Bedrock Agent. Okay, and if I expand this view a little bit, it looks a little bit like a Claude Web ChatGPT interface where it's an agent that you can interact with. So I can tell it, hello, can you list my VPCs for me? Okay, let's see what it does. Oh, not sure what happened there, but it should actually, I'm not sure what this working draft is, but it should actually come back with, it will list your VPCs. I'm not sure if someone may have messed up my demo system here, but it will list your VPCs. And then the next step is that you actually get it to try and create you a VPC. And that's where the agentic guardrail kicks into play. And you cannot do that. It will actually stop it, which is fantastic. Let's give it one more shot.
Yeah, while Jeff's working on that, I had one. Jeff, while you're working on that, I had one question come in and saying, "Hey, can we get a list of the recommended policies, that we're going to look at in AWS?" There, absolutely. We have. I'm going to put in the chat for everybody. There's a web page that just has a few SEPs that we put out today. It's not public yet, but you guys should have it. So definitely check that out, and we will follow up with you with some of the code itself, just so you can have it easy as a copy paste.
Yeah, here's the document that James is talking about. It's fantastic. We go over guardrails, SCP enforcement, how you can control MTP server use. It's quite thorough, but this is going to be an excellent resource that you can all use and take as a takeaway from this session. Now, I do not know what's going on with that agent. As you can see here, I even tried to say hello. Someone has been mucking around with it, but typically, again, it would come back and list the VPCs. At that point in time, we've got a guardrail in place in this environment using an SCP, and it basically prevents someone from misusing the agent to attempt to create a VPC. So that's the next thing that I would have shown you is once you say hello, whatever, it comes back, I would then say, can you create a VPC for me? And it will fail. It will fail and say that it cannot do it. And what happens is over here on the Slack side or the Microsoft Teams side, because this is an agentic guardrail that's been put in place by the Cloud Permissions Firewall, you will see a deny message right here, and you'll see that it's a non-human identity that attempted to create that. And of course, that's not even working for me. But anyways, you'll see it's a non-human identity that's attempting to create that VPC on your behalf. It's something Bedrock execution role. And what you don't realize is that when you're interacting with these agents in the cloud, they're essentially, they have a non-human identity that is attached to them on the back end that you don't even realize that's going and executing permissions on your behalf. And when you spin one up, it creates another non-human identity. It's out there, it's in the cloud, and it's got permissions. And if you don't have guardrails in place protecting the other services, it can potentially get misused, okay? So that's really, really the takeaway here is that when we're looking at these agents and these agentic services within the cloud, we have to be thinking about how we protect their interaction with the other services, okay? Whether that's creating a VPC, creating a brand new ingress egress point, potentially messing around with something inside IAM and creating an identity, something like that. The takeaway is that these agents can be misused within the cloud if they don't have guardrails in place saying which services and which permissions within those services they can and cannot use. So that's super, super important. Now, the other part, the other side of this that I want to show you is we're going to take a look at a real Claude scenario, a real Claude example, okay? I'm going to create a new Claude session here, and I'm going to say, and we're going to pretend, okay? So we're going to pretend that in this environment right here, that we are a health organization, a clinic, okay? And this is a real AWS environment, as I just showed you. That's what we were just in. But I'm going to pretend that someone has come to me and they've said, Jeff, can you help me? We are having to enter patient data twice in our internal systems right now. And that is a big waste of time. Is there a way that you can help us become more efficient? The answer is, Absolutely. So me as a developer, I've been encouraged to use agentic coding because of speed, because of efficiency. We want to embrace AI. My leadership wants me using it. I use Claude Code all the time. It knows that I'm constantly doing stuff in AWS. That's great. So what I'm going to do is show you how someone would typically try and solve this problem from the beginning with Claude Code. So with Claude, I'm going to say that the doctors and the nurses are having to enter patient data twice. Is there a way to make this more efficient? I'll blow this up just in case it's a little small for people to see. It's going to do what Claude does. It's going to shimmy. It's going to think. And it's going to say, look, I've got 3 different ways that you can potentially do this. You can do a direct API webhook. You can do a Lambda, or you could potentially do like an rsync job or something like that. Which of these fits your stack best? Well, me as a developer, I don't want to deal with a container with an operating system. I love Lambdas. I'm not super technical with Lambdas because I usually do things, in a different manner. We'll just pretend. But I know that it's serverless, it's lightweight, and it's cost efficient. So I think that Lambda is a great option here. Let's see what it does. Okay, solid choice. Lambda handles this kind of cross-system sync cleanly without any always-on infrastructure. Do you want me to build a quick local proof of concept so you can see it working before we touch any infrastructure? Well, local proof of concept, sure. That can't hurt anything. It's going to do it. And this is all live, okay? So here we go. Open POC demo HTML file. Here's the file running locally. Awesome. It's just an HTML file that opened on my hard drive. Maria Santos, date of birth. Here is some examples of insurance providers. I'm going to choose Aetna. I'm going to patient. And look, 0 duplicate data entry. Pretty cool. Okay, register another patient. Do it again. This looks pretty good. Okay, I'm sure that my boss is going to love seeing this. And what's it say? It says, do you want me to spin this up in a real Lambda in AWS so you can hit it live? Okay, sure. It doesn't seem like any harm. I'm not creating any, I don't think that that's going to be doing anything that's going to get me in trouble. Plus, I want the boss to be able to see it and share it. So that's fine. Go ahead and create it in a Lambda. I'm going to say go for it. It's going to noodle. It's going to do its thing. I'm going to go ahead and turn off bypass permission, or turn on bypass permissions because I don't want to get annoyed with more and more permissions. And this is also something that gets you in trouble with your developers. As you can see, it says authorization requested. Do you want to allow this access? You want to agree and confirm? That's fine. It can access the data. It's going to need that to go create this Lambda. Cool. Now, here we go. Logged in, creating the Lambda execution role. I did not ask it to do that. Look at that right there. I did not ask it to go create any sort of identity role or anything like that. But what you didn't realize, what I didn't realize as the naive developer, is that a Lambda is useless without a non-human identity or a role in AWS that basically connects it to the platform. But what you'll see here is it was denied, calling the create role command. And it says right here, there was something called a Sunray CMP that blocked it. All right, so if I come over here, back into Slack, you'll see at 1:28 p.m., it's now 1:29 p.m. here in Atlanta, where I'm located. You were denied access to create this role in My Help web app. Do you really need access to it? Here you can say yes or no and approve it. Okay, so what happened was the agent went sideways without the intention of it going sideways to get the job done that I gave it. We have got a guardrail in place using the Cloud Permissions Firewall that says you cannot create IAM roles or use any of these privileged IAM permissions unless you're one of a very specific set of identities. If you're not one of those allowed, our default deny, the guardrail, the service control policy, the CMP itself will stop that dead in its tracks and route a notification to the user letting them know what happened, as well as if you need it, it will route an approval to an approver right here to approve it in Slack and give you the real-time access. Okay? But the takeaway is the guardrail kicked into play, and the agent was not allowed to go outside of its bounds and create a situation where it would put the business at risk. This could have very well been a piece of compute with a VPC, with a security group rule, with inbound SSH or RDP access. And all you did was you gave Claude Code 3 sentences, and it just goes and does it. If you don't have the guardrails in place, things can get really sideways very, very quickly. This is just a great example of how, if you have the SCPs in place, if you have the RCPs, and then downstream the custom managed policies to protect permission sets, specifically as it relates to AWS, then you will be protected against that. This is also another great example of me telling you how these agents often act on your behalf, and they use your credentials to try and do things in the cloud. So this looks like I did it, right? Because it's acting on my behalf. So 2 great examples there to really highlight, why these guardrails are so important, both from within as well as outside in. So now, what does it look like when you actually try and get control of this landscape, right? So this is what it looks like without something like the Sunray Cloud Permissions Firewall in place, all right? I'm going to switch the view here to with CPF, with the Cloud Permissions Firewall, okay? The Cloud Permissions Firewall will automate all of these policies for you. You never have to write another service control policy, another resource control policy, another least privilege policy. We will illuminate this, and we can set the guardrails with a few clicks inside our solution that will essentially ensure that you've got an access control layer that's now in place, that's governing who and what can access any of these services at any point in time. Part of the beauty of what we do, though, is we can grant those permissions back in real time. That's what I kind of showed you there with that Slack example. And really, I'm not going to do a full demo again, but you want to notice that even if you just look at our homepage here on the product, you're going to see that we're exposing identities that are using AI. Okay, these can be cloud native identities, but they can also be endpoint-based agentic identities that you had no awareness of, that were out there, that are interacting with your cloud, that are over permissioned, that need to be right-sized, that haven't been used in X amount of months or possibly years, that you need to clean up. And that's also something that we can do for you with our zombie quarantine feature. But we do it in a way that you can set the guardrails, you dictate how your cloud will run, you remove all that risk of these agents going sideways, so that the business can develop, they can innovate without the scenarios like I showed you not being blocked and not being protected against. And then we grant the permissions back in real time as they're needed for any of these agents and any of these agentic identities through Slack and Microsoft Teams. And it all happens in real time, so that you stay essentially at least privilege across your entire cloud landscape, but you can grant the entitlements back as they're needed. And we really, we automate the pain of having to do this by hand, which is just an incredible use case, because these guardrails are more important now than ever. But you can get in trouble as it relates to doing this by hand at scale if you don't know what you're doing. They're also very inflexible. If you do this by hand, you're not going to have the ability to grant the permissions back and the entitlements back as they're needed, which is a huge use case with a control and an automation solution like the Sunray Cloud Permissions Firewall. And then I do want to once again say that we have the Enforcing AI Governance Across AWS Organizations guide here that will walk you through how to help protect MCP servers, how to set those base SCP guardrails that I was talking about. We even get into the API keys here. So, we're excited. We're just launching this today. We're very, very excited about getting this in your hands as well. James, that kind of concludes the overview. Do we have any questions? Because I'm watching the clock here.
Yes. And we, just to noodle my own question on, you mentioned, hey, that Lambda that you created was acting as your user, right? And that's one of the things with agentic work is like, it's just breaking our back, It's like, yeah, this is Jeff. We've authenticated this is Jeff. We have MFA, this is Jeff, what have you. And then it's not Jeff. It's like, okay, well, now what? So, we saw that and at Sunray and thought, well, geez, this is essentially why this is the overprivileged problem, just with gas thrown on the fire, right? So everything Jeff talked about today is sort of stuff we've talked about long before agents. It wasn't like, oh man, we need to talk about AI. It just created this urgency around, man, we have to actually clean up IAM and the way we use it, because yeah, things that we thought that were in control and we thought, oh, we've got our back this done this way. It's like, that's just not going to work for agents. So that always fascinates
No,
me.
it's interesting because there's nearly nothing that I'm talking about that I've shown you today from a guardrail standpoint, from a policy standpoint, that's some new innovation, right? That wasn't around for the last couple of years. It's basic IAM hygiene, but now we're looking at it from a different perspective, James. Instead of just saying, "Oh, I've got all these overprivileged things and I've got all this unused stuff," we now have to look at it from a more holistic perspective of, I've got hundreds of services with tens of thousands of permissions in them that any of these agents, whether they're in my cloud or outside of my cloud, can go touch. So this is a much bigger conversation now than I've got overprivileged identities and I probably need to right size them. This is the services themselves in the control plane itself of the cloud, and having to put down an access layer that it's no longer nice to have. You actually have to do this.
Right. Yeah, fascinating stuff. To Jeff's point about our, doing this, what could you do today, right, with just existing cloud native tools? Check out our SCPs that are on the website. Absolutely put those in place. SCPs, as Jeff said, are really powerful. They're going to, granting permissions back and having a system like we have with just in time through Slack and Teams. Yeah, you're going to need some third-party tooling or like Sunry to deal with that, but at least get your guardrails in place with the SCPs we have. If you do want to learn more about SCP writing, we do have SCP workshops on our website, or just reach out to Jeff or reach out to me, and we can talk more about that as well. But I want to jump back into just a few questions. And then we will wrap here shortly. Jeff, the first one, let me pull up here. First one here, our teams treat the question of like how people are using agents. In your experience, are teams like treating agents like users? Are they treating them like workloads? Something totally different from a permission standpoint? How are they categorizing them sort of in their, as an identity?
Well, it's two different ways. So when you look at it from the services themselves in AWS, James, it's going to be typically a non-human identity scenario. Someone mucked with that Bedrock agent that I was attempting to demo, which I hate, but I was able to tell a story at least. But that does have a non-human identity behind it that you have no ideas. It's a Bedrock execution role. Every one of those agents is going to have one of those non-human identities behind it. And as a result, you've got to be tracking that, thinking about how you're not only going to protect those agents as they continue to evolve and proliferate from messing with other services in the cloud, but also be thinking about cleanup, because they're left behind. When you create one of these roles and it's done automatically, they don't automatically clean up. All right. And that's the cyber litter and the cyber garbage that I was telling you about. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, when you're talking about the endpoints, that's really where the human identity comes into play. And that's where you have to be thinking about the agents that are acting on behalf of you, your developers, whoever it might be that's using Claude code. I mean, James, you're using Claude now, right?
Yeah,
your identity,
every day.
if you're doing something in AWS, your identity is dangerous. If it doesn't have guardrails, it dictates what you can and cannot do once you SSO in through Identity Center in AWS, right? You're going to have access to permissions in a permission set, and that agent's going to be able to have access to those permissions in that permission set. Okay, so it's really the same things that we've been talking about for years: human identities and non-human identities. But there's just so much more focus on them now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have another question here on the just-in-time, sort of the permission granting system that you showed briefly in Slack. The original for the security folks here, right, or I guess for the DevOps as well, like JIT, right, was assumed, there was a human user sort of in that system. How does it work when you have an agent that might be elevating JIT? Are we just trading off, I'm going to have 1,000, permission requests now because I put an SCP in? Is it super powerful? How can we get around that without like grinding things to a halt?
Yeah. So two things. Number one is it's critical that you be thinking about, if you do this by hand, if you implement SCPs and least privilege policies and everything that I showed you by hand on the cloud side, you have to be thinking about how this affects the business. Because at some point in time, something, whether it's human or non-human, will need access to some of those permissions or potentially some of those services. So there's a big educational component there. Now, with a platform like Summary, we're going to be looking for that 24/7 and routing those permissions to the individuals themselves, if they're humans, or approvers at those different accounts and projects and folders and those kinds of things, letting them know that something is attempting to use one of those permissions, and it could be like an agent, like you said, James. And so, no, we are not in the business of denial of servicing our customers with just-in-time Slack alerts, just-in-time Microsoft Teams alerts, right? If it is an agent that does need a permission, we can grant them a full entitlement to use that permission, that bundle of permissions, that service. It can be time boxed, it can be perpetual. You can even do auto approve. In general, you can do it after hours. You have lots of flexibility there so that we don't hinder any of these agents or any of these identities from getting their work done at any point in time. The idea is to keep the environment at least privileged across all the services, keep the ones that aren't being used disabled, but grant things back as they're needed in real time so that the business can develop, so they can innovate, but not in a risk posture situation.
Yeah. Yeah, that's sort of answers another question that was like, how do you manage practically govern, or how do you govern agent actions across multiple AWS or GCP without breaking workloads, right? And it's just, you need to have some
Kind of the
sort
same
of,
thing.
yeah, some sort of governance around. You need to have a plan on how to, grant this stuff back, whether it's through a JIT system like ours or some other scheme. So, all right, I'm going to ignore all the questions about your beard. I think that speaks for itself.
We usually get one or two.
So listen, we do have a free trial. If you do want to check out Cloud Permissions Firewall, just go ahead and check it out at sunrysecurity.com/trial. Just signs up. You don't have to talk to us. You can onboard your cloud, and we won't. We'll ask you how you're doing, but you can actually just do it all by yourself without even Jeff's help. Although I highly recommend asking Jeff how to do some stuff in there.
Yeah, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm always here to help, be an extra resource for you. I do this every day with all of our customers. We're an extension of your team as it relates to governing this risk landscape.
Definitely follow Jeff on LinkedIn. He normally has some interesting opinions on there every once in a while with that QR code, or he's just Security Jeff on LinkedIn there. So, guys, thank you so much. Like I said, if I have your email, you're in this raffle for Identiverse. I hope to see you there. If you have more questions, feel free to send them to me or Jeff. And otherwise, if you have other things you'd like to talk about in this IAM agentic cloud security space, please let us know. We are always trying to do more sort of educational content. We have some stuff coming out on AWS organizations. We have our research team coming out with some interesting stuff I can't talk about just yet that I'll send you soon. And obviously, we're always pumping out stuff on here's the best way to use SCPs, RCPs, what have you. So please let me know if there's some other topics you wanna cover. Other than that, that's it. Thank you so much, Jeff, for leading our session today, and I'll see you next time.
My pleasure. Thanks, everyone, for joining.